Hey guys, welcome back to Cracked Housing Fab.
That's right, today we're going to start on part 2 of the 4-wheel drive conversion for the Toyota Tacoma, so stay tuned for that. Alright guys, before we get started, we want to go over some of the parts that we're going to need to do this conversion. Now some of the stuff you can do and get used from a junkyard. Some of the stuff I wanted to go new because I am keeping the truck for a while, so kind of you can do this for cheaper than what I did, but this is how I'm going to do it. So to start off with, this is the 4-wheel drive hub for the manual locking hubs, and we're going to put all the list most of this stuff in the description, so you guys can go check it out if you need to. Then I've got new seals for the bearings, inner and outer. That's for the wheel bearings. ABS rings, wheel bearing, snap rings for the wheel bearings, the tool for the locking hub, all new hardware for the lockout to the wheel, to the hub, new upper ball joints, gaskets for the lockout hub to the wheel hub, new lockouts, seals for the axle shafts, 2 new CV axles, 4 manual locking hubs, and associated hardware that we're going to need. The front differential, this is out of a 4Runner, but pretty similar to, it's actually the same thing as a Tacoma, a front drive shaft. So these are all the parts we're going to need. Obviously we'll show the stuff in more detail as we go. Alright, step 1, jack up the truck. We're going to get both tires off, and we have to get the spindles off to be able to press the new bearings and all that stuff in. We need to start out by getting a lot of the stuff that's on the spindle off. So the brake caliper's going to come off, rotor. We're going to separate the upper ball joint and take like the ABS sensor, brake hose, stuff like that that's going to come off. And so that's our next step. The joys of working on a truck that's spent its life in Michigan. Snap the first bolt.
I thought the salt would help. Prove me wrong.
It does in food, but not in this scenario.
Oh.
Cool. Okay, so we got the caliper off. Brake line, we broke that bolt. Oh well.
I broke that bolt.
Yeah, Kurt broke the bolt. This one that holds the brake hose to the spindle. It's gonna happen. So we've gotten that off. Next is gonna be taking off the big castle nut for the upper ball joint. So I put these wheel spacers on here, and we have a video about this, the proper way to install them. So go back and check that out. So we just had to get these out of the way to be able to pull the rotor off. Now next step's gonna be separating the upper ball joint from the spindle. And then there's 4 bolts that hold the lower ball joint. Okay, so next step, we do actually have to get the ABS sensor out, so you can see that bolt. Okay, so I tried to take the ABS sensor out. It broke off down in the spindle. It is what it is. I figured some of this stuff was going to happen. So, but anyways, moving forward, next step I have to take these there's 4 bolts on the bottom of this ball joint. The 4 bolts go into the bottom of this, and they go through the ball joint up from the bottom. So that's how you take that apart. And like I say, they're in, but it's a 14mm socket. That's it, then the spindle comes off. Okay, so we popped the cover off of the back of the hub on the, this is the Prerunner. But so it's kind of interesting that they pretty much just leave this without a spline or without needle bearings and bushings in there. But for the most part, it's pretty much the same. And the ABS ring is already in here, so I actually don't even need the ones that I bought. But yeah, so we need to take this nut off now, and that way we'll be ready to press the bearing out. Okay, so kind of interesting idea. So this nut is gonna be really freaking tight. So what I'm gonna do is actually bolt this back into the tire and then use a breaker bar to take that back off. Yep, so this is the tool that I purchased. It makes, I don't know how you would do this without having that piece.
Yeah, I think you'd have to. Yeah, it just locks right into those holes.
There you go. All right. Whew. That sucker is tight.
You could say probably 200 foot-pounds almost. Look at that.
So if you don't have ABS, there'll be a metal spacer in there that's laying in there. So obviously you have to know to take that out and put it back in when you reassemble. Okay, so after we got this apart, I realized I ordered a set of these because I wanted to be able to use my ABS again when I'm done. But I didn't know what I was going to have when I got into this. I really couldn't find the information anywhere online. So hopefully I can do this to save you guys some money. Don't buy these if you want to reuse your ABS. You're already going to have it. Obviously, if you're not, again, you just don't need it. You just have a metal spacer in there. And then this lock nut, you can reuse this. I purchased an extra set from Toyota, and I didn't know that the hubs that I ordered came with them already. So I have 6 of these that I don't need. So don't order an extra set of those. You won't need them. That's a pry bar. I need a breaker bar. Oh. I did need that too, though. Thank you. All right, so it's time to repair the front differential. We've got both spindles out now. Yeah, so I bought new seals for the differentials. Kind of a cool little trick. I'm gonna trim the rubber lip off of this because they have a rubber lip on there. Trim it off the old one, and then I rented the bearing race seal press thingy, so it'll make it easy to put in. So I'm gonna trim this off. Okay, so I trimmed that lip off the seal, and then the cool thing is this will just go right over top of this to protect it. And then what I'll use is the seal and bearing driver set on top of there, and be able to tap it right in. Obviously, we're going to manual locking hubs. So this is the actuator, the vacuum actuator for the automatic locking hub. Obviously, I need to lock this in 4-wheel drive, otherwise it's not going to work. So we'll have to get this piece separated from the differential. Okay, so I just got the actuator off, and this is the shift fork that actually actuates on the automatic 4-wheel drive. So we obviously need to lock this into 4-wheel drive. Several different ways that you can do it, but the simplest way I found is just put a hose clamp right around that shaft right there to lock it that way and tighten the clamp down good. These are not moving parts, so it should never run the risk of loosening up or anything like that. Once it's locked in, and then we would just unlock it at the wheel hub. All right, so Kurt went ahead and put the hose clamp on there so you can see it in there. Put it on that shaft, tighten it down really well, and then we'll put it back on. It's obviously locked in 4-wheel drive now. Good to go. This is where the magic happens.
All right, guys, if you like this video and it's helping you out, don't forget we have part 1 of this video where we put the transfer case, transmission, and all that good stuff in the truck. So we'll put the link in one of the corners here. I can't remember which one, but so yeah, make sure you check out part 1 of this video.
And also, while I'm finishing this up, so I just got the actuator put back on, but make sure when I was able to get this out of a 4Runner, out of the pick and pull near us. It's impossible to find Tacomas in a junkyard around here for some reason. Like, they just don't exist near Detroit. And so yeah, this one came out of a 4Runner. I double checked the tag inside of the door. You'll have to do some research on what gear codes they are, but make sure you get obviously the correct gear ratio to match the rear. So yeah, just be mindful of that when you're doing your research, doing your reading. Double check that, and if you get one on Facebook or eBay or whatever, double check. Make sure that you got the correct gear ratio. So we're ready to put the differential in. It's kind of exciting to get to this point. There's a few pieces of hardware that you need to get. I would recommend, if you can do it at like a pick and pull, to do it, because this hardware can be expensive. But there's 3 mounting locations. You got the 2 back here and then 1 here. So this one requires this kind of funky looking nut with a hex head on the back. It's like a huge long bolt. You need washer, and then there's a washer built into the bolt. And then this like rubber isolator washer. And then it all comes in like this. And then this piece on that rubber isolator fits over this. And then the frame of the truck will be here. So that'll fit over, slide together, nut goes on there. So this is a case, if you don't have this stuff, you have to buy it. And these bolts, from what I can tell from my research, is like 80 to 100 bucks to get all this hardware. So it's worth it. I think I paid $80, I think, for the whole everything. I would like to thank the Academy. Differential time. But there's a spot right here, right behind the rack and pinion, where the one single stud goes. And then there's a bore right here. And on the other side, that's where those big long bolts are gonna go. So we're gonna lifter in place. As much fun as that sounds.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, let me get this. You got yours lined up?
Yeah, it fell right in.
That's never had a bolt in it, right?
Nope.
Yeah,
there we go.
bushing goes
so it
under.
isolates from the frame.
Yeah, there we go. That's cool how everything's there for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
there we go. Whew. Gotta give some props to Toyota for thinking ahead.
Yeah.
Like big rubber washer went in between the differential and the frame. Obviously, so it isolates the vibration from the frame. But yeah.
And that little guy screws up in there.
Yep. So we'll get this stuff snugged up. This is exciting.
I know.
We're getting closer.
This truck's never had a differential up here.
Nope. As long as I...
And it fits, there's nothing you have to move or do.
Yeah. The oil pan is the same.
Good. Tells you right on there, GL5 7590.
Oh, yeah.
There's a sticker on there for the oil weight.
She is in. All right, guys, we're ready to press apart the hub. We have a press, thankfully. Kurt's dad has a press that we can use. We don't really have any like parts we need to be able to press it apart easy. So to get it started, we're actually I'm gonna have to hang on to this, and Kurt's gonna actually hit it with a hammer and drive this hub out a little bit. So. All right, so we had to actually tap the hub out of the bearing a little ways, and now we kind of built this little wood setup here to hold the spindle so we can drive the hub out now. It's kind of not the best way, but we can't get it to work with the, unfortunately, with the press, so.
Whoa. Send it.
All right, so with a socket, we just beat the crap out of it until it fell out. It's not the most scientific way to do it, but it works for what the tools that we have. So now we just have to get the rest of the bearing out of the spindle now. And a little FYI, a little lesson that we learned. If you live anywhere where rust happens, buy new backing plates. They're like 80 or 90 bucks for the pair from Toyota. Odds are you're gonna wreck them when you do this. We already did one to kind of see.
Yeah, we kind of destroyed this one. It'll look good with new ones anyway.
Yep, so we got new parts coming, but. Oh. All right, next step, there's a seal right here, so we have to pull that off. That's pretty straightforward and easy. Just get yourself a chisel and smack it off there. There we go. And then there's a snap ring, which you can see it popped up right there. Just because it's kind of getting forced out from us hitting the. There we go. There you go. Thank you. And these are, I mean, you can see this one got messed up, so it's a good idea just to get new ones. I mean, they're so cheap. It's like 10 bucks for each side. But so now we're gonna use our handy wood thing set up. Drop this back in there, and then we're gonna smack the bearing the rest of the way out. And odds are it's gonna separate when you take it apart. I mean, after 220,000 miles, I don't think we complain if that came apart. All right, so we're able to smash this out of here. So Kurt's dad had some different pieces of metal and stuff like that we could combine to drive it out, and we used the socket, but we drove it out, and that's the old bearing there. So clean it up. And then also, guys, if this is something that you obviously are not interested in doing, a lot of your local mechanic shops will do this and charge you a little bit. But yeah, if you don't have a press or access to a press, it's kind of something that you'd have to have somebody do for you. But all right, so to install the new bearing, you just have to be careful. There's a rubber seal and a metal seal, so that way you have to make sure that the rubber seal side goes towards the outside, towards the hub. Kind of find it's happy where it's happy in there. And then we have the old outer race from the old bearing to use for our to line everything up.
Yeah, because on this you don't want to push on the bearing inner side. You definitely want to push on the race.
Yep, make sure that you're centered. The ram is centered right on the center of the bearing. All right, and then
send her home. Definitely don't want to use the hammer to put the new one in.
Not if you want the bearing to last. There we go. And this has a little bit of a machining oil on the outside, just for preserving the metal. Makes it easy to go in. Yep, you'll know when you're pressing it. you'll feel a significant amount of resistance. And if there's not a gap on the back, you're there. All right, guys, so we press the bearing in as you would have just seen, and then the snap ring goes in really easy. You can just push this thing in, get it started on one side and work it around with your finger, and it'll snap in. Like you don't need snap ring pliers. You get the old one out, you may need them, but putting them in, they go in really easy. So now the next thing will be is pressing the hub in. All right, guys, so I'm wearing some different clothes because we had to wait to get these dust shields in. But we got the new dust shields in, put those on, just 4 bolts, very easy. And then this seal is very easy. Just tap around the edge nice and easy with a hammer and you can drive it on there. Goes on really nice. Okay, so now that the seal's put on, I'm gonna put a little bit of grease right in here and on the seal. So that way when we drive the, or press the spindle on, it'll have something nice to ride against. Put some on there, get some on the seal and some on the bearing. A little bit on the inner lip because when you go to drive the or press the spindle in, that way it'll go in nice and easy. Okay, so we're getting ready to press the new spindle on, or the new hub on. You have to be careful when you press this. You want to support the inner race with we have a nice steel piece. It's like a piece of thick tubing, so that sits right on the race. And then when you drive the spindle in, you're not going to push on the actual bearings. You'll be supporting everything without putting any pressure on the actual roller bearings inside there. So this is kind of our setup. We just kind of stacked up some pieces that we had to make it work. So we'll set this on and make sure that that piece is centered on the inner race. All right, so we just have a few different pieces of metal. All right, so we stacked up a couple pieces, and that way it's pushing on the actual hub and not hurting the studs or any of the machine surfaces there. All right, you'll know when you're there because when you're using the jack, it tightens up and you really can't it can't go any further. And then obviously you've seen Kurt moving this to make sure we didn't have any binding of the bearings or anything like that.
Look at that.
All right. Yep. Make sure you don't have any binding or anything like that with the.
Oh, nice and smooth.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm back in my garage now. I'm going to show you how everything goes together here because I need to put a little bit of grease on this. So this is the ABS tone ring. So that's going to go in there first, and then we have the lock nut that's going to go in there. I always like to put a little bit of grease on these. That way when you go to torque everything down, it's not hanging up and you're getting the proper torque that way. I'll drop it down in here, pretty easy, literally just drop it in. This lock nut, put a little bit of grease in the bottom of that too. Drop it on there and then run it down hand tight. Okay, so you got to torque this nut pretty tight, and I don't know how else you would be able to do it, so I'm just going to set this back in the wheel like that, and then we'll set the torque. Okay, so this nut, this is where that special socket comes into play. So this thing goes to 174 foot-pounds, so it takes quite a bit to get this thing tight. So I have Kelly here to help me, and so I'm going to put this in here. And then she's going to stand on the wrench because sometimes it'll want to like twist and rotate out of there. You don't want to do that because you'll strip the bores out that are inside that nut. So it definitely takes some oomph to get that thing on there. I always like to make sure and rotate it. There we go. Yep, everything rotates still nice and smooth. Obviously you don't want it to be bound in there, and when you tighten that down, if the bearing doesn't move, then you did something wrong. So don't just assume that it's good to go. You gotta knock the outer lip of this nut into there with a punch. All right, just like that. That way this nut will never be able to back off. And now it's locked down. Next step is I have the suspension ready to go. One thing that I did off of camera that I realized that I had to do, I had to unhook the sway bar link and push the sway bar down, unhook both sides and push the sway bar down because the axle will not pass through this area because the sway bar is in the way. They might be a little bit different between the years depending on where the sway bar link hits or hooks up. But on this one, I couldn't get it to go through. Yeah, there's the differential. I put some grease on the seal when we initially pressed that seal into the differential. And then I also put some grease on the end of the shaft where it's going to meet and on the spline, just so there's a little bit of a coating of grease to go in there. So that's my next step, is to push the axle in there. And it does have this little snap ring, so that's going to have to be pushed in, and then you'll feel it kind of click and snap in. So slide the axle in, then you can line it up with the splines of the differential. They require you to spin the axle a little bit back and forth. Just gonna get the splines to line up. There we go. Popped in. And one thing that I did too, it's gonna be hard to show on the camera, guys, but there's a lip back in there that you can get this on and just give it a little bit of a tap with the rubber mallet just to make sure that that C-clip is snapped in all the way. Okay, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but one other thing I did off camera is put the front drive shaft in. So that flange right there is the front differential. So just 4 bolts. And then obviously back here at the transfer case, just put those on. Pretty straightforward. I didn't feel like that was really necessary to show, but just wanted to show you guys that that was installed. Okay, so spindle is almost ready to go in. One thing that I didn't show a second ago, and again, guys, I'm sorry I'm jumping around here, but this seal is the inner seal. That's going to go right here. So what I'm going to do, put a little bit of grease on this lip of the seal, and I'll tap it in with a rubber mallet and a 2x4 over top. And this is a Timken seal, and they already pre-greased, I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but they pre-greased the inner lip of the seal for where the CV axle is going to ride against. There we go. Set it on there and then kind of eyeball it to get it nice and squared up. This covers it most of the way, and give it a good tap. And we're good. Everything looks good there. And then there's also a needle bearing inside of that hub. So that's the axle shaft will ride against that. And I put some grease on there, and I'll also add some grease to the CV axle right on this bore right here, and then this piece and the seal. Just so kind of everything that's touching to each other has a lot of nice grease and will go together really nice. I think we're ready for the hub to go back on. So it's kind of like a detail thing here. The axle shaft through the spindle, or the hub, as you're putting it on, and then also lining up your bottom 4 bolts for your ball joint. Okay guys, so now I have this whole, I've got the 4 bolts tight. Now the spindle is installed and the axle shaft's pushed through. So now I need to put the upper ball joint back into the control arm. So I jack this up so just a little bit of the weight of the truck is sitting on there, and then just grab the upper control arm, kind of line everything up, push it down, put your castle nut on, and I obviously didn't show the replacement of the ball joints, but pretty straightforward repair. There are plenty of videos out there on YouTube about that, so I didn't feel like I needed to include that. It's more related to the 4-wheel drive conversion anyways. Alright, 19mm socket for that guy. And this is 80 foot-pounds, tighten it up to. Okay, so now the spindle's back in the truck. That's pretty cool, making some progress here. Okay, so now that the spindle is all put back in, next step is going to be washer with splines, internal splines, and then a snap ring right here that's going to go onto the shaft. And there's a groove, a snap ring groove right in there. And this was kind of something that I was uncertain about when I was researching all this. So there's only 2 parts that go on this before the hub goes on, before the manual locking hub goes on. So yeah, I'm going to grease these up. I'll grease up in here really good. Slide that guy on there. And also, because I bought aftermarket axles for this, they give you a snap ring with the actual eyelets cut out in it for just the regular style snap ring pliers. The OEM one, which I did order, I didn't know that I was going to receive this, doesn't have that. It doesn't have these 2 open spots or 2 holes in there for regular snap ring pliers. So it actually makes it a little bit easier to put the snap ring on. I'll slide this guy on. And I always like to take a flathead or pry bar, and then just make sure this is seated all the way down. Push the axles all the way forward. There we go. Boom, you'll see it snap in. That's all set up now. Everything's still turning really nice and smooth, so that's what we want. So now we can put our hardware on for the manual locking hub. Okay, so for the hardware for the manual locking hub, that requires 4 pieces. And then I bought a kit. It comes with all 4 pieces, and then obviously times 12 because you need 6 for this side, 6 for the other side. It contains 4 pieces. You've got a double-ended threaded stud, obviously just a regular nut, a lock washer, and this cone washer. You may be able to find this stuff
somewhere like at a nut and bolt supply, something like that, I very highly doubt you'd find this anywhere. So that's why I found this kit. This was something else that it kind of had a little bit of a hard time understanding and what goes where and all that stuff. And then this stud, a long side and a short side, the long side is what goes into the hub. So you can thread it in, and then what I like to do, get it snug with your hand, and then just grab 2 nuts, thread it on, double nut, and then tighten the nuts against each other. Okay, yep, and then put the nuts, double nut, and then tighten them against each other, snug them up, and then you can run this guy down. I'm assuming there's a torque spec. I couldn't find one. I'm just going snug, back them off. Some of the stuff is hard to find as far as torque specs and that sort of thing. But obviously I was grabbing up close on the ratchet. That way I don't put too much force on them, but getting them pretty snug. And then obviously you're going to take that long side in and then just repeat this 5 more times, and then we'll be ready for the manual hub. Also, one other thing too is nice is if you're wanting to do a manual hub conversion, all of these parts apply to that scenario. So all this stuff that I'm doing with the hub and whatnot, that will work for your manual hub conversion if you're looking to do that. Obviously you need a new hub, different axles, and they will go into the automatic disconnecting differential if that's the setup you have on your truck and you want to go to manual locking hubs. You already have a 4-wheel drive that you want to convert. We'll have all the parts listed in the description for you. I bought a set of the ASIN, or however you say that, ASIN, I believe that's how you say it. Anyways, bought a set of the OEM lockouts. Very nice set. I mean, you can find them, the aftermarket one's a little bit cheaper, but I mean, the quality of this stuff is usually pretty good. So now I have all 6 studs installed, so that's good to go. And the next thing is we have to actually loosen the bolts up around the outside of this to separate this lockout into 2 pieces. Have all the bolts out. Go ahead and separate this guy. Go nice and easy. Don't need to force it. Come apart. And then I set the lockout to the free position. And then this is what it looks like inside. Comes nice and pre-greased. So we're going to set this piece aside, the lockout or the dial part down. And then this part is the part we need to put on here. But what I'm going to do is put a little bit of grease on the studs. That way these cone washers tend to like to get stuck, and I'll put a little bit of grease on all these too. That way if I ever have to take this back apart, it'll come apart nice and easy. So now obviously we need to make sure that we put our gasket on. Go ahead and slide that guy on. And this just goes over, and you'll have to line it up. Obviously it can only go one direction because you have your alignment dowels there. Boom. Okay, so that's on there nice. And then I also, inside of here, there's splines that shaft, it's going to slide over the shaft, and I greased the back of this and inside here really well. That way everything's good and greased there as well. You have 2 blind holes here and here. Obviously you have to line up with the dowels, so you want to make sure that you have that orientation correct when you go to slide this on. And then boom, it'll slide in, lock in. We start putting our hardware on. So that cone washer goes first, and it'll be a little messy with the grease, but I'm telling you, if you ever take this apart again, it'll be a lifesaver. So cone washers go on, and then lock washer, and then the nut. So obviously you do that 5 more times. Okay, so I have all the hardware put on there. And so now I'm just going to very lightly snug up and just do a crisscross pattern with my ratchet, just holding it up close to the ratchet head. Just kind of bring everything down nice and even. Go ahead and torque this. And this is 23 foot-pounds. So this I do know the torque on. Okay, so that is all tightened down. Everything's still moving nice and smooth. Now the next step, to slide this piece back into the hub body. Nice and easy. There's a bunch of basically big splines on the outside, and those fit into their corresponding grooves on the hub body. Here we go. Boom. Okay. Lined up. Now we're just going to run these bolts back in that we took out. Okay, so now I can go ahead and torque these. These are only 11 foot-pounds. They're very, very light torque. Won't take much. And just crisscross like you did the other thing. That way you know it's going down nice and even. Cool thing is, obviously you have the free mark, and there's a little arrow telling you where to go. You spin it clockwise, and then that locks it in. You can see the axle turning back there. That's pretty cool. I think the next step, we'll throw the rotor on and put the brakes back together. Okay, I put some new pads and rotors on while I was in here, so it'll be nice and new. Hooked up the brake hose. Now you would have seen that I did end up snapping that bolt off, so I just drilled it through. Used a 1/4-inch bolt with a nut and lock washer. No big deal. So that's all fixed. Okay, and then you would have seen that I broke the ABS sensor, so I'm gonna run that through back up to the top here and get that all straightened out. Last thing I have to do on the suspension is I need to reconnect my sway bar on both ends. Pretty easy. I just put a pry bar in here, you know, up on the control arm, pick up on it, align the bolt, and you're good to go. Tighten the nut again. Okay, so now that we have the suspension all done, all the hubs put on, next thing we have to put a breather hose on top of the differential. In hindsight, I should have done this when we were putting the differential in, but whoopsie. So it's going to be kind of hard to show this on the video. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not, but obviously you have the differential out, so I would advise putting that on first and then putting your differential. And I picked up 5 feet of 3/8 fuel hose. That should be fine, and then I'm going to run it up into the inching compartment. So okay guys, I apologize. It's so hard to film under here and see what I'm doing, but I do have that hose in place. You can see it moving right there. So I got that on top of the differential. Just in hindsight, I should have put it on and then used the hose clamp, but I was able to get a zip tie on there good and tight. So now this is a sway bar and running up to that's up above. It's hard to tell from this perspective, but that's looking up through the hood. So I'm going to run this hose up and bring it up top and out of the way. Okay, that hose is ran, but it comes up right here. I tucked it away from the exhaust manifold. Comes up right here, up and around, and then just zip tied it right to the firewall here. At least it's up nice and high, should the occasion come up where hopefully I'm not in this deep water, but you never know. All right, now it's time to put the tires back on. One issue that I did not foresee when I was going through all the research, the Spider Tracks, at least the ones that I have, wheel spacers will not fit over the manual locking hub. I need to do a little bit more research on that and see what I can come up with. But for now, I guess I'm just gonna have to throw the tire back on and run it that way. It kind of bums me out a little bit, but just so you guys know. All right guys, got the tires back on. So now next step is going to be filling the differential. So there's the fill plug right here, and the drain plug's down here on the side. It's a number 10. I already broke this one loose. You run it out, and then it's pretty easy. You just use a transfer pump or whatever you need, or whatever you have. Fill it until the oil comes out of the drain hole here. Maybe put a little drain pan down here. It's a little bit of drip out, but yeah, so I'll get it filled up. All right, start putting the oil in. Just bought one of these cheap little transfer pumps. Cool thing is they do give you the spec right on the differential if the sticker's still there. It's a GL5 70W90, and then just start filling her up. Okay, finished filling it up. You can see it draining out. I probably actually overfilled it by 1 or 2 pumps, but I'm just gonna let that drip out for a few minutes and then put the drain plug in. All right, drain plug's back in. Wipe the differential down, had some oil on there. It took about 1 1/4 quarts roughly to fill it. I bought 2 quarts obviously, but yeah, so that looks nice. And we should be ready to go. All right guys, it's all done. Skid plate's back on. And now we're ready to go take it for a ride. We weren't gonna leave you hanging without showing it in action. So we're gonna meet you guys over at Kurt's parents' house. Woo! What's up guys, we made it out here. 4-wheel drive works awesome, so we want to kind of give you some action and show you that it's pretty awesome.
All right, guys, if you're thinking about doing the 4-wheel drive conversion from 2-wheel drive, you should definitely do it. This was awesome. It's a lot of fun out back here in the woods tearing it up, but I think it was pretty cool.
Heck yeah, it's awesome. Shout out to Kurt, obviously, for helping me, busting his butt, putting that transmission, transfer case, front differential. Kurt's dad for helping us out with pressing wheel bearings. Kelly for helping us film. If you guys are wanting to do this, do it for sure. It is awesome. Anyways, yeah, dude, I'm super stoked. This thing is, it's just taking it to another level.
Unbelievable. And you have the locker that you can turn on.
That's
so with
right.
that and 4-wheel drive.
Oh, dude, you can go anywhere you want, pretty much. But we'll put all linked all the stuff in the description.
Yep.
So definitely go down there and check that out. And like, comment, subscribe. And thanks for watching Cracked Housing Fab.